Inflation has increased marginally by 2.9% in November on a year-on-year basis. According to data from Stats SA, headline CPI stayed just below the Reserve Bank's target range. This follows the surprise slowdown in CPI recorded for October, which increased by 2.8% on an annual basis. The main drivers behind the latest annual inflation rate included housing and utilities, miscellaneous goods and services, as well as food, alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages. Transport was the only negative contributor to the latest number. While inflation has ticked up slightly, it still remains far away from the midpoint of the Reserve Bank's 3 to 6% inflation target range. Given external factors, market players are uncertain about what the bank's next interest rate move will be come January next year. Well, to discuss the implications of the latest inflation numbers and how consumers need to be dealing with the currently relatively high inflation situation, I'm joined by Dr Frank Magwegwe. He is from Nedbank. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Great to be here. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to the viewers.
Great stuff. So just give us a sense of what your immediate reaction is to the headline number.
I think my immediate reaction is a little bit of a surprise, but I think the trajectory were in the right direction. So interest rates have been coming down, and in fact our view at Nedbank is that we should see more interest rates cuts coming through, but we do know that our Reserve Bank a little bit cautious. I think they want to avoid the mistakes perhaps of cutting when they shouldn't cut, or a higher than anticipated cut. But the trajectory looks good. That's in the medium term, low interest rates and inflation are here.
All right. So you're getting ahead of me because I was going to ask you about interest rates a bit later, but that's fine.
Yes.
Just in terms of inflation, it is interesting to see that the food price inflation has slowed down even further.
Yes.
It's around the low 2% level compared to 3.6% in the month of October. This is, of course, very positive, but not everybody's inflation is the same. Of course, the lower income you earn, the more you spend on things like food and transport. So what would your advice be to households who are still struggling with their inflation?
I think that's a good point, that everyone has a slightly different baskets, and in the lower side of the income, we tend to find baskets spent on food, baskets spent on transport. So I think our message as Nedbank for them is to say, if you're finding it still a little bit challenging because the dip is low, it's really about prioritizing those essential goods first. But we also need to add that in addition to food, we know on the lower end, consumers are somewhat still struggling with indebtedness, and therefore it's very important to be proactive going to financial institutions if the challenges of finances are still high for most low income earners.
Yeah. Now, of course, the inflation number is backward looking.
Yes.
We're now in December.
Yes.
We're at that point where people are, going to go on holiday, enjoy the festive season, do some spending. They have to spend on gifts and things like that. They don't have to, but it's a choice they may make.
Yes.
But at the same time, they need to look forward to January, where there are a lot of expenses.
Yes.
Just speak around some of the approaches that you'd give to consumers so that they're on a better financial footing come the end of January.
Yeah. I think three things for me. I think the first one is just a call for consumers to reflect. Often we rush ahead and tell them budget, be careful around traveling, spending that is not planned. But I always like to start by saying, when you reflect and look at what happened this time last year, it gives an opportunity to identify perhaps where did I overspend, what travel did I do that wasn't planned. So I want to start there. And then the second point is to say those fortunate to get a 13th check or those fortunate to get a bonus, I would strongly encourage already saying part of it, let me put it for January expenses that are coming. And I would even go further to say, when you put it in a place that's easily accessible, you may be tempted, given the holiday spirit, it's good to lock it away in an account such as a 32-day deposit, because, the effort of getting it is a little bit hard. The third point is just to realize December means emotionally, physically, we drain, there's fatigue. There's research that suggests that when we are fatigued, we make poor decisions. So just to remind yourself, I'm tired. Do I need to do this now? Can it wait overnight so that I can think about it? Those are ways that consumers can use to protect them from January. I think the final one might be around financial boundaries. Just the idea of being able to say no. You said in the intro, you don't have to give gifts, but the tradition says give gifts. So maybe the boundary is, here's my budgets for gifts, as an example.
Yeah. Dr. Frank, what about those who may get paid early? In the month of December, it's quite common these days for people to get paid maybe a week or 2 weeks earlier. What's your advice there? I mean, my personal strategy is if I ever get money early, I just shove it in another place where I can't see it.
I would agree with that. So close your eyes and say, you know what, this money is not there. And a good way to do it is it comes into that, quickly put it away in a savings account or a 32-day deposit. Because what happened during December, we engage with our credit card, with our apps a lot. So just seeing the money there, you are focused on now, and you easily forget that January is, in fact, just a few weeks away.
Yeah.
So put it where you can't see it. I love your strategy. It works for most people.
So at the top of our conversation, you were already on the interest rate story. It's a very important one because, of course, we've only just had 50 basis points worth of cuts.
Yes.
So it means the interest rate level is still quite high.
Yes.
And the Reserve Bank warned us that they may not necessarily give us a cut in January because of a lot of unforeseen issues, geopolitics, a new president in the United States, inflation concerns, and so on. Given that, against the backdrop of slightly lower inflation, what do you think people need to be cognizant of, especially in the area of credit and bringing their debt down?
Two things. We know when the Reserve Bank signals cuts in interest rate, already people who have been on the sidelines thinking about buying a car, thinking about buying a house, they are already saying interest rates are coming down, the installments will be more affordable, let me go for it. So what I would say there is be very careful, because we can see that the trajectory, it's not big cuts. So what you need to do, make sure that installment, when you do your calculations for the bond, when you do your calculation for the car, you are able to afford the current. Don't put in a big interest rate cut. That's the first thing. The second thing, it's always a good habit to try to pay off small debt if you're preparing to incur other debt, as people often do, as I've just said. So often, small debt, just make a plan to be able to pay it off so that you don't have that sense of additional debt and over-indebtedness.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those insights.
Great to be here.
Dr. Frank. That was Dr. Frank Magwegwe. He's the Executive for Financial Wellness and Advisory at Nedbank.